like those videos. I do. It just shows people's journeys and how they've completely changed from when they were a player into a manager.
What you mean, uglier and fatter?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Well, for anyone listening on Spotify who doesn't have the pleasure of viewing this, but is listening, that voice there that you'll have heard, I am joined tonight by none other than current Leyton Orient manager, Mr. Richie Wellens. Richie, how are you doing? You all right?
I'm very good, thank you. Got a bit of a cold and a flu in last week or so, but excuse my voice, I'll do my best.
It's going around. I think we've all got it. I've had it, and it's just, yeah. I mean, it knocked me for 6. So the fact that you're here, I'd have cried off tonight. So don't worry about it. But thank you very much for being here. When weirdly, I didn't do great with the announcement of this podcast because I tried to make it like a game and tried to get people to guess, and the first guess was you. Like they literally just went Richie Wellens, because I think it was because of the hashtags of the clubs that I tagged, because I tagged every club that you'd been a part of. And it's quite obvious when you're tagging Manchester United, Swindon, Doncaster, and Leyton Orient. It's like, well, you've got one player there at that point and one manager. So everyone dived in straight away. But then questions came, and we've got some very, very good questions coming here. And we'll see if we might put you on the spot and see what you've got to say. So before we do, first of all, this season, how's things going for you? How are you finding League One after dominating us all last year?
I think we had a tough start. I think there's reasons behind the tough start. We signed a couple of players late. And when you sign players late, they need to get fit. And we didn't have an opportunity to get them fit in friendlies or in training. We need to put them straight in. So out of our first 4 games, we only got 1 point. And since then, I've been really happy. We've had a few too many draws of recent weeks, but again, injuries have kicked in. We've lost Jordan Graham, who is one of the best players in the league. He's a big loss for us. But from a position where a newly promoted team has got off to a bad start, we have stabilised ourselves. We're very, very difficult to beat. We've only lost 3 in 14 in the league, and then 3 games has been by 1 goal. So we're in every single game. We need to be better in a final third, which with the players that we've got and a lot of young players, it's just a process that we have to go through. And sometimes a coach, manager, it can be hard because you want results now. But you need to be patient with these young players and keep, encourage them to play the right way, which we're doing at the moment. We played Bristol Rovers away on Tuesday night and had 65% possession, which no one really does that against Bristol. So we just need to tidy up in the final third. But we've got a lot of players that as the season grows on, then they'll keep improving.
Yeah, and I think that's important there, because it's something that you started last season with Orient, was making you guys hard to beat at home, especially. Like I witnessed my team come there on what I felt was good form, and we just fell to pieces when we were up against you, because you were such a strong presence across the entire field. As far as like being promoted, do you feel that was this the aim? You're sort of sitting mid-table at the moment. That first season when you go up from any side, really, to solidify your position in the league before then looking to next season progress further. Is that kind of where you're at the minute?
I think it's all relative to what club you're at.
Okay.
So, for example, you're a Bradford supporter. I think Bradford's an absolute monster in League Two. I think if they get promoted to League One, they should be ready to go again, because the infrastructure, the crowd that you have, it allows you to do that. You only have to look at, Plymouth got promoted to the Championship last year. In their first season back, they finished 18th. Bolton, it took Bolton 2 or 3 years to go from League Two to League One. And then it's littered across, Sunderland took a few years, Portsmouth took an age to go up. So it's a really, really difficult league. I think it depends on what club you have. Obviously, finance is a big part of that. But what we want to do is are we really realistically going to get promoted in our first year? It would have been really, really tough. So what we needed to do is put things in place where the second and third season we've got a 3-year plan to get in the top 6 of League One. So we need to make the right steps. What we don't want to do is rush out and not buy because we're not going to buy players, but go and get free transfers that are 31, 32, 33 years old, that are experienced at the level, that are going to do a really, really good job short term. But then in a year's time, we might have to get them out and get new players and you start again. So we're trying to do it the right way. It just does take a little bit longer. And
I think the good thing with Orient is, considering where the club has been over the last sort of decade or so, the things that the club have seen, the fans have witnessed, they've got a lot of patience for this sort of project. And you find it a lot of clubs, like you mentioned Bradford there, Bradford fans don't have that patience when it comes to, if a Bradford manager came in and said, I have a 3-year plan to solidify, then build upon, the fans would be up in arms. And I feel like because of what they've been through and because they've seen, what can happen if you try and overshoot before you're ready, or if you bring in those players that aren't necessarily going to be 3, 4, 5-year long players, and then you have to replace and start again every 12 months, you end up in that position where you slip backwards, and you don't want to do that. And I actually, it's quite admirable from every Orient fan that I speak to says the same thing. Everyone's along and bought into this project, and that's a really, really rare thing, I think, in lower league football especially. I find that you find with the teams that have maybe dropped into the National League or have come from the National League, they've got a lot more respect for that and they've got a lot more time for those projects. Whereas your other clubs, your Bradford, your Swindons, they want it now, and it's really, really difficult for the fans to grasp. I mean, for you, obviously, you're having a phenomenal time at Orient, but I want to touch back on last season, because last season was awful to watch for me. I hated watching it because Steve Evans always seems to get one over on us. And he was pushing you guys. Obviously, at Stevenage, no one expected them to be up there with you. You guys were up there and you set that standard pretty early. When Stevenage were kind of close and you were looking at them, and I think they had quite a few games in hand. They had to play you twice over the Christmas period and January period and things like that. How do you as a manager prepare your players for a team that really, aside from those 2 games, you've not got much control over what they do? If they win all their games in hand, it doesn't matter what you do, if that makes any sense. Like, how do you prepare your players to be ready for them to catch you, essentially?
You don't prepare for the opposition. So whatever it's no good us preparing. If Stevenage have got Carlisle on Tuesday night and we've got Northampton at home on a Tuesday night, the only thing that we can worry about is ourselves. And what we do is we just set standards in training and set a culture around the club very, very early on that, my eyes weren't lying to me. I could see every single week from Monday to Friday that everything we was doing right. Was we going to win every single week? No, because it's pretty impossible to do that. So we knew that if we was in a training ground doing Monday to Friday, the correct decisions, the right work ethic, giving as much detail to the players as we possibly could, them taking it on board as best they can, and then them carrying it out on a Saturday. The fans were all on board. Every time we played a home game last year, the atmosphere and the atmosphere and the feeling around the ground was exceptional. So we only concentrate on ourselves. You can't be looking at what other teams are going to do. You start overthinking things, and then you actually start veering away from what is the most important thing, and that's your own staff and your own players.
I like that because you do see other managers that do maybe focus a little bit on the other teams too much. They always have things to say about the teams around them, and you find week in, week out they'll make comments. And I agree there. I think you focus on you do what you can control. Big fan of that. Big fan of sort of taking control of what you can. Nothing else is in your control. Why worry about it? They'll do what they're going to do. You know what you can do. So I'm going to go on to some questions for you here. I'm kind of going backwards. I usually we start at the beginning of the career, which, actually I will. I'll go back to the beginning because I want to talk about really quickly Man United, because you were there at probably one of the most successful times that club has had. I believe, did you leave in 2000? Am I right in saying?
Yeah.
So you were there over that sort of that treble season. You saw all that. What age did you join Manchester United? How old were you?
Well, it was probably about 8 or 9. The Centre of Excellence then was run by, Brian Kidd and Nobby Stiles. So they was a local scout called Tom Corliss scouted me, and then Brian Kidd came and watched me and took me in at the Centre of Excellence at the Cliff. Back then it was only one night a week, just on a Tuesday. And we just used to play 5-a-sides every day. It wasn't now where there's a load of phases of play and there's loads of different kind of work. It was literally play 5-a-sides, get a sweat on, and then go home. And obviously then you graduate through the clubs and you go up the age groups. I was privileged to work with some really, really good coaches. Warren Joyce, who's now at Nottingham Forest, Paul McGuinness, who was an outstanding youth coach, and then Eric Harrison, who is obviously famous for the class of '92. He was really, really good for me, a father figure, disciplinarian, which I needed at the time. My downfall kind of started when he had to retire. It just coincided with each other. So I was privileged to work with some really, really good youth coaches.
Yeah, I know. I was reading, obviously, you can take news articles and things like that with a pinch of salt, but that's kind of all we have to go on, I suppose, when we're looking up for things like this. And it said you got out of there because you felt there was a lack of opportunities that you were getting at Man United, and then you ended up at, I believe it was Blackpool. Am I right in saying?
Yeah. It wasn't a lack of opportunities. So I was from the ages of 16, 17, 18, 19, probably just under 19. You know, I was in all the England youth age groups with the likes of Wes Brown, who was at United with me as well.
Yeah.
Stephen Gerrard, Joe Cole, Ashley Cole, Jonathan Woodgate. So it was a real good, brilliant set of players in England, and I was with them. But then I seen them being professional, dedicating their lives to what they needed to do. You know, I had issues away from the pitch in terms of my concentration going away from my football. Didn't develop my mobility, my physical aspects the best that I could. Right. And when you've got Keane, Scholes, Beckham, Giggs in midfield, they were 20. I think Keane was probably the oldest at 24, and you're 19. You have to, look yourself in the mirror and say, listen, I probably need a reset here. I need to start again and go away and start focusing on trying to get back up the leagues.
I suppose that's fair enough. That's a different way of looking at things. You mentioned Wes Brown. Wes Brown was in sort of the same year group as you, I think, coming up. Was John O'Shea as well?
No, Shazy was probably a year younger, but because he was so good, him and Darren Fletcher was always played up a year. So, Shazy was Wes Brown could have potentially been the best defender that England had ever seen. Wow. The injuries that he had, I think he ruptured both Achilles, done both ACLs. They took a toll on him, but unbelievable athlete, fantastic player, hard as nails. Shazy good footballer, 2-footed, can play midfield, centre half, right back, left back. So you have these global superstars like your Beckhams and your Giggs, your Rio Ferdinands and your Ronaldos and Dwight York and all these top, real, unbelievable players. But then you need the glue to fit all these together. And people like John O'Shea and Darren Fletcher was really good at that. Never moaned and went in and done a job for the team.
And John O'Shea has the most bizarre run a footballer has ever had. Like the way that he runs, just always. I remember I went to watch Man United. I think they played Olympiacos in the Champions League around 2007 or something like that. And I went to watch, and it was my first time I'd been and seen them live. And I ended up the second half just watching John O'Shea run, because I was like, this is incredible. Everything about what I'm watching right now says that man should not be a footballer. But then when he got the ball or when a challenge went in, you just couldn't get past him. I think he scored that game as well. I believe he scored right towards the end of the game. Like, I was delighted. I'd watched that man the entire game. I was like, this guy's great. Obviously, growing up a lower league fan, I didn't pay much attention to the Premier League. Got an opportunity to go, and it was like, there's a big difference. Like you say, you've got these superstars, and they genuinely have like that aura around them. Don't they? Just standing there, you can see that there's just something about these people. So one thing I noticed when I was looking at sort of your playing career and then comparing it to your managerial career is that there's a lot of clubs that you've managed where you also played, which I think kind of as a testament to you and to what you were like as a player, because no one ever had any complaints about Richie Wellens as a player for their club. And I think the fact that they all welcomed you back as manager shows that. Like, you'd done well at all these clubs, so much so that they wanted to see you progress and they wanted to see you take their club to the next level. For you played at Leicester for a time period under Sven-Göran Eriksson, which again is just surreal. Like, that's mad. I think that's such a wild story. But which club? I'm thinking probably Blackpool, maybe Leicester. Which club would you say as a player you felt most at home? You felt like it was your best time as a player?
Well, the best footballer played was Doncaster, without a doubt, under Sean O'Driscoll. The team that we had there at championship level, without any real big superstars at the time, was a really, really good team. And then at the end of that season, probably 5 or 6 players got moved to bigger clubs. Yeah. And then probably my first 2 or 3 years at Leicester as well. So I had a 5-year period where I thought I was in my prime. They were the most. That was the most I enjoyed my football and felt that, You know, I had an understanding of what was required of me on the pitch. There was experience where I could play average and still win, which is a good thing to have as a football player.
Absolutely.
And then when I got to the age of 33, I'd done my ACL, and then that was kind of the beginning of the end for me, because I had really good players coming from behind at Leicester. And then obviously when you have an injury like that at that age, it's really difficult to come back from.
Yeah, no, I agree. You've just mentioned Sean O'Driscoll there, and as soon as you said Sean O'Driscoll, I was like, I've got a question about Sean O'Driscoll that a Doncaster fan sent in from me, and this is a quote from Sean O'Driscoll, and it's regarding the playoff final against Leeds. And I've been told to ask you what it was like playing against Leeds in the League One playoff final after having an injection in your arse. That is the exact quote from Sean O'Driscoll, and that's how he phrased it. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine how I felt seeing that drop in my inbox, thinking, how do I word this? But you said just ask you. So
yeah, what it was is we needed to beat Cheltenham away.
Right.
The last game of the season, it was us, Swansea, and Nottingham Forest going for 2 positions, and we needed to beat Cheltenham. We was pretty confident. Cheltenham needed to win to stay up, and we needed to win to get automatic promotion. And I needed a double hernia. And in the first half, I was so bad that you just go to push off. You look at the ball, and he just takes that, struggling to really get going. And at half time, he dug me out in front of the players, and he said, "Are you carrying a caravan?" So I weren't happy about it, which we had a little bit of a disagreement. Anyway, we ended up losing the game, and we had to win the playoffs. We then played the first leg away at Southend. We drew 0-0. In the afternoon of the game, I just couldn't get out of bed. It was hurting me that much. I just couldn't get out of bed. I needed the surgery, but obviously by the time you have the surgery and then the rehabilitation, you're not going to make any of the playoff games or the final. So we drew 0-0 in the first leg, and then luckily I was fit enough to play in the second leg after a couple of injections. James Coppinger was outstanding in that game. We won 5-0. Coppinger scored a hat-trick. I came off after an hour and rested for the final. And then before the final, you can only have it 20 minutes before the kickoff, because otherwise it wears off. I had one in each bum cheek, and then one in the hernia as well. So I think it lasted about 65, 70 minutes. And when it wears off, you can just feel the pain coming back. So that's the story behind that.
Wow. So from your perspective then, did you kind of keep that from the club when you realised, or was it something that the club picked up on the double hernia, or did you think if I tell them this, they're going to make me, I'm going to miss out, so I'm going to keep it in, I'm not going to try and play through it?
I knew I needed it because I had a problem where I just couldn't push off properly. But obviously then once the physio said I needed it, I was aware of it. I'm trying to just play through it. And then once Sean dug me out at half time, even though he was right, I wasn't playing well and just couldn't. I wasn't happy about him actually digging me out, so it was probably a good thing in the end.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, listen, played Leeds, Bradford fan, happy either way for me. So, you know, there were a few things I was reading. It was like victories against Huddersfield. I'm like, I like this guy. Beat Huddersfield, we'll go with it. So yeah, no, that the Sean O'Driscoll one immediately. As soon as you mentioned his name, I was like, I've got to ask the question now. I was going to avoid it originally, but it's fine. It's not an issue. So your best time as a player, you feel, was at Donny. You obviously went back there as a manager. Now, this is where, for me, some of the questions have come in. A lot of them are around the management side at Donny and when you were there. And obviously, Donny fans still hold you in such high regard, that like top to bottom. A lot of the questions sort of come around before we get to the ownership side of things, there was a question regarding, I think it was the last summer transfer window you had at Doncaster. And it was mentioned that
as a player.
As a manager. This is when you was a manager.
So I only had one transfer window as a manager.
Why they wrote last window? Do you know the Donny fans?
Yeah.
They basically said in that summer transfer window, did you miss out on the likes of Louis Reed and Dan Crowley over that window? Is that correct?
Yeah, they both of them players came in for trial, but the wages that they wanted, we couldn't afford it.
No, and the question was if you could have done that window different. Do you feel that you would do now looking back, or are you one of those that's kind of, it happened, I've done it how I've done it, I wouldn't change it?
No, I think I was a little bit naive going in there in the first place. My head was telling me no, but my heart was obviously telling me yes. The message from the club is this is a rebuild. We're going to be around the bottom because of the budget available. So Darren Moore did an incredible job. The first part first part of the previous season. But then from December onwards, as soon as Ben Whiteman was sold and that money wasn't reinvested in the squad, the team really began to struggle under, first of all, it was Andy Butler, and then when I took over. But the problem is sometimes when you go into a rebuild, you need to get players out to free up money, or you're lucky and you've got a load of players out and you've got loads of free money to then go and invest in the squad. I had that similar situation at Swindon. But Doncaster lost the likes of Ben Whiteman, Josh Sims, Robertson, John Jules, Taylor Richards, Ellery Balcom. They was all the best players. But they was all on loan players, and he was paying very, very minimal fees for that. So you lose 7 players, but you've actually got no capital coming in. So it's really, really difficult to replace them. And then when you go in to build a squad again, a lot of my squad was built on free or really low fee loans. We had Dahlberg, we had Matt Smith from Arsenal, Ethan Galbraith. And when you pay, you're not paying any money for them players. No. They're basically really low loan players. So I think my available budget when I went in there was existing offers out to Brad Halliday, Reece James. I think Joe Wright, he was waiting for his injury, but it was a contract offer for him. John Bostock had a clause in his contract that triggered an extra year on significantly more money. If we would have kept them 3 players, the budget would have been nearly enough took up as it is. So it was a really, really, really tight budget.
And I think that's
I would imagine now they've got a bigger budget now in League 2 than I did in League 1.
Yeah, I think that was something that was kind of pointed out over the summer. I know one of the owners came out and said that there'd be significant investment this year because last year obviously wasn't good enough. And I think they brought in something like 15, 16 players this summer. And you look at the players that they have brought in. Yes, you're looking at free transfers and things, but these aren't players that'll be coming on lower end League 2 wages. So yeah, they probably have got that higher budget. And I mean, you've touched on it there, like budgets and things like that. There's a lot of questions from Doncaster fans a minute that surround the owners. A lot of people aren't happy with how the club's being run. From your perspective, while you were there, what was the atmosphere like in the background? You know, trying to focus on the things on the pitch, but obviously you've still got to manage that background politics and things that are off the field. How was that for you?
I don't really think, some clubs is a lot of politics. So when I first started out my managerial career at Oldham, the politics were through the roof. Like if you could pick a problem, and obviously they've escalated, and you look where Oldham are now. Obviously they're on the way back up now with Frank, who's took over. But there was politics all over the place, over the place. And it wasn't really that at Doncaster. I have to say that Gavin Baldwin's a good guy. Yeah. He was very, very supportive. And I can only say this as they're speaking to me. Whether there was things going on in the background, which I think there was, but I can't comment on that. I can only see how they was with me.
Yeah.
Gavin Baldwin was fine with me. David Blunt, I actually thought he was a nice guy. My biggest frustration was, David Blunt would want to know the team. He would want to know the tactics. And I would sit him down and explain exactly the way they were going to play, exactly the way that the opposition are going to play on a Thursday. And we'd get beat on a Saturday because I just haven't got the players to complete in that league, playing Sheffield Wednesday in the team.
Yeah.
And we'd get beat. And exactly how we done well in the game was exactly what I said to David. And exactly how we lost the game was... So everything I was seeing, I was painting the pictures for him before they even happened. Yeah. But we just didn't have the budget. There was no real politics. But there was a little bit of politics when I tried to sign Will Grigg. And I was promised Will Grigg from Sunderland. And part of me getting Will Grigg in was that I had to get Omar Bogle out of the club. Obviously, I wanted Will Grigg in. So then I said to Omar that you need to go to Bradford. I think it was Bradford at the time. And he said no to Bradford, which is fine. It's his prerogative. And then David said to me that, okay, Omar Bogle doesn't get another Doncaster Rovers squad, of which I've said, that's fine, but I still need Will Grigg. Okay, not a problem. We'll get Will Grigg done. We messed about that long that Rotherham had come in and snatched Will Grigg off us, and then we ended up trying to get Aidan O'Brien, of which the paperwork didn't go through in time, and then we ended up. I think I probably played 50% of my games at Doncaster without having a striker. We had a young kid who was a backup that we needed to play, but we hadn't signed him to play. But I think I spent 50% of my games not having a striker, and then the window closes, and then you end up signing players that that you don't really want to put your name to, and you don't want to sign, but you're desperate.
So Omar Bogle essentially was there, but you just couldn't use him at that point because he'd refused the deal elsewhere. Is that right?
Well, Omar had 3 or 4 clubs come in for him within 24 hours of the window shutting, which he said no to each one. And then with my conversations, with the chairman and with the CEO, was tell Omar that he's not part of the plans going forward, and once we get him out, we can get a new striker in. Once I put them proposals of the clubs to Omar and he said no, I then relayed that back to the ownership, and he said, okay, no problem, get him out anyway, and we'll still give you Will Grigg. Wow. Because he said no, obviously he wasn't happy. And fans always say they don't really know what goes on in the background. And it was interesting that when I left, Omar Bogle wasn't in the squad for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he was back in the squad. So that was probably the only bit of politics that I experienced at the club. There's a lot of good people at the club. It's just the atmosphere, and you know what it is. John Ryan's a really, really big personality to follow, and he had the supporters on side. You know what? As a player, you felt that if you do really well, he loves the club as a supporter of the club, and the rewards will be there. But when you don't really see the chairman, there's no interaction, there's no real chemistry between the board and the supporters. It can become difficult. And to be fair to Terry Bramall, he puts his money and he spends a lot of money in a club, but he didn't really want to be seen. I very rarely seen Terry. He was supportive when I spoke to him, but I very, very rarely seen him. In terms of financially, he didn't really want to put any money into the club.
Wow. And then obviously you left Omar Bogle, ended up leaving. I think he went to Hartlepool. And then I think he signed a 2-year deal at Hartlepool. I think 6 months in, ended up leaving and going to Newport. Is that now, isn't it? Was he as big into his music back then as he is now? I don't know if you've seen his rap career that he's.
No, I mean, I'd heard a few stories about Omar before I went to the club. That he wasn't particularly good player, but he was a really, really bad lad. And I actually thought, you know what, he was a really good lad. Didn't have a problem with Omar at all. Towards the end, he went on social media and done a few things that, I think he'd seen that we was losing every week, and he thought, hang on a minute, I can jump on this and I can add more pressure, which I kind of get. I didn't have a problem with Omar, not at all. Did I think he had enough? Did he think he had enough quality to play at the top end of League One? I didn't. I think I've been proven right with the clubs that he's had since. So that I didn't have, in terms of personality, I didn't really have any problems. I just thought we needed better to be where Doncaster always wanted, or I wanted them to be, or I seen them in terms of my images of when I was a player there. You're playing in the Championship, it's a full house every week. All right, might be 3,000 or 4,000 away fans, but when the Keepmoat's full, it's a really good atmosphere. We just didn't have the players, nowhere near the squad, the players to take the club forward. And again, it's not rocket science. People always say, do you do a good job or a bad job? I always say a manager does a good job. Look at the 30 games before you take over, and look at the 30 games after, and it gives you a good indication of if a manager does a good job. Okay, I was treading water at Doncaster, but since I've left, look what's happened.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, again, this is why I was saying the fans hold you in such high regard. I don't think anyone out there, any Doncaster fan, sort of puts the blame on what's happened on your shoulders.
I get that, but still, when I'm having to go away, at home, and try and put a team on the pitch that I'm proud of, and the supporters can be pleased with, and spend Doncaster it's a working town. They put the hard-earned money into seeing a product, and they've been delivered a product under 6-7 years under Sean O'Driscoll, and then Grant McCann, and I wanted to give them that. Yeah. But when I look at my team sheet and I look at the opposition's team sheet, and I think I think tactically I was really good there. Yeah. But I can play 95% of this game perfect, but we can still lose. Yeah. You've got Wiggins, you've got Ipswich's, and I was playing the likes of Joe Holloway, Brandon Horton, Max, and these had potential to be decent players. They just was young, and when you put 7 or 8 young players together at the same time in League One, you concede goals, you concede from set plays, and it's really, really difficult. And that's exactly what it was.
And it's very easy in League One. You know, I experienced it. 2017, we were in the playoff final in League One, and within 2 years we were back in League Two. Like, it's very, very easy to get, you know, if that money's not there to be able to compete, it's very easy to just drop back down and end up in those problem positions. And that's what happened to us. And, you know, we came back down, and it's a very, very slippery slope, and it's hard to get out of. One last question on Doncaster. And you've mentioned there, you spoke about like the team that you played under at Doncaster. You wanted to give the fans that. You wanted to give them that feeling that they sort of had when you had that team. And it is a simple question. Like, that was considered like the golden era for Doncaster fans, that team that you played in. How was it playing in that squad under O'Driscoll? Like, how did you feel? Like, how confident was the entire place? Like, because it seemed to just be like, I hated playing Doncaster around those times. Anytime we had anything, I think we drew you in the cup a few times, I hated anytime we had to face Doncaster, because you were so hard to break down. How was it for you guys?
I actually done a lot of research before I signed for the club. I was a free agent from Oldham. And I had quite a few offers from bigger clubs, but I had to move, and I didn't really want to move at the time. And I looked at a lot of players, I looked at a lot of the videos, and I thought, you know what? We had the likes of Jim O'Connor, Gary Roberts, Brian Stock, James Coppinger, James Haytuts, some really, really good players, And I thought, you know what? I think we can, and I like the way that Sean played football. I think we can do something. Yeah. And in the first 1 or 2 months, and you can. I don't know if you could have a podcast with any other players that have played with me at Doncaster, but you know, I went in there and I was really, really shocked at what I seen. I seen a lot of talented players that wanted to go through the motions, wanted to drift, wanted to train at 50-60%, and I come in and, you know, I'm at it every day in training. I'm not fouling people on purpose, but I'm being aggressive and I'm training like I play. And
you're not pulling your tackles.
Well, no, not at all. And when I'm doing anything, I try and do it to the best and a real intent. Again, going back to when I was a younger player at United, and I didn't do them. I didn't have them standards. So I made a conscious effort that I was always going to have them standards from there on in. You know, after probably 1 or 2 months, the players are probably looking at me and going, he's a moaning git, which I was. I loved the moan, but I wanted people to do it right. And then within 9 months of me signing for the club, they'd gone from mid-table and we're beating Leeds at Wembley in front of 80,000. So, you know, I'd like to think that I was a big part of setting standards. That's some really, really talented players, talented players. And as I said, then we got promoted to the Championship. 1 season in the Championship, Brian Stock went to Burnley. Gareth Roberts went to Derby. So I think Jim O'Connor went to Derby. A lot of players got really, really good moves. But we probably went from them looking at me going, is he a bit too moaning? Can he disrupt the group? To actually going, you know what? He's doing it on the pitch. And I like that as well. I like putting pressure on people because I knew that if I'm giving it them and I'm putting it on them, I had to perform myself. And I think in that 2-year period, I would say that I could probably count on one hand Cheltenham, that last game at half-time, being one of them when I wasn't really at it.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. You've mentioned Oldham a few times. We actually did a few episodes on Oldham when we first started doing things. When this was when they were kind of towards the bottom of League Two. There was them and Scunthorpe. We did things on both because we felt that things were just going on really, really silently. Like, as a fan of an opposition club, we weren't hearing what was happening. And when we opened that door, some of the things that we found out that had been going on, not just with I think the Lemsegams at that point who were the owners, but the previous owners and how it had kind of just spiraled. When you were there at Oldham, was there a sort of any indications at all? I suppose I'm looking more from the manager's perspective that those problems were coming. We interviewed Pete Wild as an example. Obviously, was at Oldham at one point, and he said that he could see what was coming, and it's one of the reasons he didn't accept his contract extension. Was that similar for you, or was everything all right there at that point?
No, so when I first took over, John Sheridan was brilliant. He got me in as a coach, and unfortunately for him, we started the season off really, really poorly. And Simon Corney came to me and said, Rich, John and Tommy Wright are leaving. Will you take the team? And I was like, Simon, listen, I'm not ready. And I don't think we can score a goal, never mind us winning the game. And this was on I think we'd just been beat 5-1 off Rotherham, and this was on the Monday morning. We had Peterborough the day after, and he went, Rich, I've got no one else. Can you please do it? And I like Simon. He's a great guy. So I said, yeah, no problem. We ended up winning 3-2. Peterborough was second in the league. We then beat Portsmouth away on the Saturday 2-0. We then beat Crewe on the Tuesday, and then we beat Blackburn. So from going where we won 1 in 9, we've now won 4 on the bounce. You can't do anything other than take the job, even though I still didn't think I was ready. But I have to say, under Simon Corney, the wages were paid late, but he would give you a 2-week head up. He'd just say, listen, the wage is going to be 2 or 3 days late. These players live from month to month. They're not millionaires that can go into a savings account. Any direct debits that get bounced and it's down to us not paying them, bring in the receipt, we'll pay all that. And it was fine. There was issues, and obviously it was hard. But I think in the first 17 games we got 32 points, and only Wigan and Blackburn, who went up that year, had got more points. And then the takeover was on the horizon, and we could see little things happening. We could see things happening under John Sheridan, where 6 or 7 trialists would arrive from France, from Belgium, from this, that, the other, and we'd go out and trial, and we'd say, no, they're not good enough. When all of a sudden now, before we even brought them in after the trial, they'd been given a 2-year, 3-year deal. So the signing players behind John Sheridan's back. So that had already started. But once the takeover happened in full, that's when you get the issues of telling you what formation to make, to pick, telling you what players to pick, discipline this player but not this player, and then it just really happens. I'll never forget. Craig Davis was desperate to leave because Charlton had just lost Josh McGuinness, who went to Bolton, and Craig Davis had a year left. Sorry, he had 6 months left at this time on a certain amount of money, of which Wigan have come and offered him a 2.5-year deal. Sorry, not Wigan, Charlton offered him double his money for the next 2.5 years. Craig Davis was 33. So I had an honest conversation with Craig, and I was like, Craig, okay, I totally get it. I'll let you go. And I was going to sign Devante Cole from Fleetwood. Yeah. And I thought it was a good swap, a young goal scorer who's on the upward curve. We could use the money what we're getting from Charlton to pay for that. And the owner just went, no, Craig is a fighter. He's staying. I said, but Craig is a fighter. He's done great for us. Him and Owen Doyle have scored a lot of goals for me. Yeah. But if you say no to this move, you will see a different Craig Davis. And he said no, and Craig Davis stayed. And I think Craig was not happy, and he kind of down tools from that. But
you can't blame him, though, can you?
We kind of put him in that situation,
yeah. You can't blame him because, like you say, these guys are living month to month. And I've said this so many times, like as a professional, especially like a lower league player, someone who plays sort of around League 1, League 2 their entire career, people look and they see wages, and it might be a couple of £1,000 a week, but what people have got to realise is they've got to kind of half that, because when they retire, at 36, 37 years old, they've then got to live. They've still got to carry on. They've got
and also
years left.
At that level, they're one injury they're done. So then a lot of them have not got a second skill or a second living. So they're struggling. And I would never begrudge a player from moving club, because if you're a club and you don't want that player, you're the first person. The chairman's the first person to say, we don't want this player. He's taking this much money out of the budget. Get him out. So you can't have it both ways. Players deserve everything they get, as long as they're professional and they're at it and they earn an honest living. They deserve them extra money when it comes.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there about like the wages, maybe being a few days late and things like that. But there's a difference, I think, between how that was handled and how a lot of other clubs seem to be handling things like that at the minute. Is that there was a communication line, there was an openness and an honesty, and I feel like that's missing from. We've seen. You look at Reading, you look at Chef Wednesday, things like that. Clubs that are going through issues. Scunthorpe have been a massive one as well, where players haven't been paid. There were reports of that happening at Swindon recently. And it is just about communication. And I feel like a lot of people would be a hell of a lot more receptive and understanding if it didn't seem to be this big secret.
Totally agree.
Clubs need to be open and honest.
But that was under Simon Corney when the new owner took over. Then the wages weren't being paid, and there was no communication. And he thinks that just going to a foreign country and hide it away will mask over the issue. It doesn't, because lads have still got to live here. And what would happen is if our wage bill was, let's say, 150,000 a month, he'd come in with 50 grand and pay the ones that you can. Well, do you pay the ones that are playing, who are on more, or do you pay the ones that are just under that are on £300-400 a week?
Yeah.
You know, I remember a lad called Callum Mantak, who his wage at Oldham would look after his mum and his little brother. He needed that. So then we're put in a position where we have to choose 7-8 players to pay and leave 15 out, and it was really, really tough. We then dipped into we get a certain amount for the academy each month from the Premier League. We was usually dipping into that to spend on first team wages. Then the academy parents and kids would turn up. We'd lock the gates because they haven't been paying the rent for that, and it was just issue after issue. But like you say, no line of communication. I think by the time I'd been sacked at Oldham, I'd not been paid for 6 months.
That's a cheek, isn't it? Imagine that. Imagine the cheek of that conversation. We're not paid you for 6 months. We're just letting you know you're not needed no more. Oh, fantastic. Did they ever pay you?
I ended up getting it, but I said, listen, now wait and make sure that you play the players that are due it. It was just, honestly, it was difficult. But I do look back on it as a massive learning curve.
Absolutely.
Learning curve.
It's one of the first clubs that we covered doing this, and it was a learning curve for me as well when I got the legal letter from the Lentigams.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you know what? I've got nothing to lose at this point. What are they going to do? So it was just a case of bring it on. And they didn't bring it on. They got rid of the club. But then, you know, we did a follow-up with Frank. You mentioned Frank. I've got so much time for Frank. Frank invited me over. You know, we had a 3-course meal with him and his family and the Royals. And we watched a game. They lost to Wealdstone, but you could feel it. It's like there's a good atmosphere back at the club.
I still support the club. I still take me. And if we haven't got a game, obviously it's only 9 or 10 miles down the M62. I'll still take my youngest lad, and we'll stick a hat and a scarf, and we'll go and watch it. It's the warmest ground in the country. So
that is a lie. That is an outright lie.
I know, So I mean, I've watched. Obviously, they're gonna go back up. Mickey Mellon's a good manager, and now they've got finances that can take them back up. I see that Frank's actually going to roll the Atlantic. I don't know how that's going to work, but it just shows what a great guy.
It's the second time he's done it. He's done it already once.
Yeah, how? It's not just him rowing a boat on his own across the Atlantic. There's got to be other boats and security and safety measures put in place. I don't know.
I don't think there is. I'm pretty sure. I know. Well, I know. He told us all about it, but as far as I know, he's alone. As far as I know, he's solo.
Yeah.
So there'll probably be someone within a certain distance, but do you know what? He's probably one of the best characters that I've seen in the game. Like since I started doing this, like I couldn't believe. Because obviously you see the interviews and things, and you see it in football. You think that's a show. That's someone who's putting on a character for the camera. And then I went and met the guy, and I was just like, this guy is.
Yeah.
But like what you've just said there about still being a fan and going in with the hat and going with your son and stuff. That's what Pete Wilde does. He does the same when he doesn't have a game. So there is this love for that football club, and everybody wants to see them get back. Like obviously, when you're a fan of a club in the league, and like when Oldham were here, I didn't want Oldham to beat us. I wanted Oldham. You always take. I don't want to say. How do I word it? You're always happy when you see sort of local clubs struggling, but not to that level. And then, like after starting to do this, for me, I was just like, this is a club that really. It's like Scunthorpe. I hated Scunthorpe growing up because they're Billy Sharp, and I think was it Andy Keogh.
Jermaine Beckford.
I hated that club with a passion. Now I was there last week in the club director's box having a meal, and so because we've got a good relationship. Like I love that football club now, and it's hard to switch that off now because I'm thinking when they do come back up, I'm going to really struggle to do it. Same with Salford. I've got a really good relationship with Salford, but we're playing them next week, and I tell you what, I'm going to be switching that off before that whistle goes. I'm going to find that really difficult. Salford's another one for you. You managed at Salford. You also played at Salford, didn't you, before they got into the
GFL, but that was just. I'd gone by then as a player. I'd gone. I was 30, I think it was 36, 37. I'd just gone.
Back end. As far as managing the club, and as far as sort of seeing how things have gone on because it wasn't being brutally honest with how they kind of ran the club at that time. They were very, very quick to pull the trigger, I felt. And I think a lot of people felt with a lot of stuff that they did, they would literally just pull the trigger the second they felt that something wasn't going right, even if they felt it was going right, but just not right enough. Graham Alexander had them 5th in the league, and they sacked Graham Alexander. What was that like for you as a manager there? Like, because that's dealing with a chairman that's got such high expectations at a club that really is kind of at that point at its highest level. It's at its pinnacle as far as where it's gone as a club. It's always been a non-league club. It's got into the EFL. They're starting to build something, but I feel like the owners, and they were like the fans of that side of things. Like, they wanted everything now. Was that, how do you manage that?
I think one of the biggest, it was a tough job because obviously you got some really, really high profile, you know, in terms of football world superstars that own the club. But I do think that COVID had I've never lost a game at Salford Stadium. I never lost a home game.
Really?
Never. I've never lost a home game.
Wow.
So I got sacked and I've never lost a home game. Would you believe it?
Wow.
But we went on a run where the pitch at the ground wasn't great, and we probably got 4 home games on the bounce called off. So we ended up having a run of like, I don't know how many away games on the bounce, and we drew 2 and we lost 2, and it was difficult to get any. Usually if you have a couple of away games and you draw and you lose one, you get your home game back and you win it, and you start getting some momentum back. But it was really, I didn't enjoy COVID. I didn't enjoy COVID at all. I asked my teams to press, I asked them to work hard. I want to do that little bit of extra, and the fans appreciate that work, and you get a clap for a tackle or some good bit of play. You become re-energized and you continue to do it. I don't think I took over a great group of players, if I'm being honest. I think the wage bill there was astronomical for the level. But no, apart from Brandon and Santi Thomas, no one really had a resale. So, and I said in an interview, I was probably out of order when we beat Salford last year. I was running on emotion and adrenaline was still in there, and I dug a few things out. But if we're actually speaking the truth, a lot of them, I mean, my strikers were Ian Henderson, who was 36. He went to Rochdale and got relegated. Tom Elliott couldn't get a club after Salford. He couldn't get a club.
He came on loan to us, didn't he? He came on loan to Bradford.
He came on loan to you, but then when his contract at Salford now, I don't think he's got a club. The Sequer, I think he's at Halifax. He's moved around non-league. Not one of the players have moved up.
No.
So, you know, it's really difficult. Graham Alexander's been successful with the way that he plays, but my style is totally different. And I probably had, out of a squad of 24 players, I probably had 2 or 3 players. The goalkeeper was very good. Haladki was very good. He's at Ipswich now. I probably had 2 or 3 players who could play my style. And you think, okay, we'll get the transfer windows and we'll move on and we'll evolve the team and we'll start playing better football. And I can relate to the team and what I'm seeing. You know, but I never really got a transfer window where I signed. I only got 3 loans in. Robbie Gotts was a free loan from Leeds, Tom James from Hibs, and Paul Coots. Funny enough, they didn't like Paul Coots and they didn't like Tom James. Paul Coots went the year after and won promotion with Bristol Rovers. Tom James was right back for me at Leyton Orient last year and was probably the best fullback in the league. But they didn't like them signings because I'd signed them. And it was a little bit like, and I understand where Gary came from in the end. He knew that I wasn't having a lot of the players. And I thought he should have kept Gary. He should have kept Graham Alexander. If he's going to keep the same squad, keep the manager that signed them all, because you want to play that same style of football. Don't get me in and then don't back me to try and change the culture of the club and the way that your style is. And I think Gary just took the view of to sack me. I didn't take any staff in with me at Salford, so I had no football staff with me. So he only had to sack me. I could keep all the other staff, or do I let Rich have 15 new players? It's a lot cheaper to get rid of me than get rid of 15 players. But again, look where the club is. So I think in hindsight, if you would have backed me, I think Salford now would be a League One club. But I respected his decision, and you know what? I didn't argue the case. I wasn't going to change the way that I was. Could I have handled things differently? Yeah, my communication could have been a lot better, I must admit. And again, I've learned a lot from that. I like
Yeah.
Gary. I think he's a top guy, real top guy. And
Yeah.
when you watch him on Sky Sports and he's doing his debrief, I know he has loads of presenters feeding him stuff, and he talks a hell of a lot of sense, and he sees the game really well.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, he had an emotional and a financial attachment to them players, and it can cloud your perspective on things.
I think that's something that frustrates me, is that if I watch sort of Monday Night Football and I see Gary Neville, and like you say, he speaks a lot of sense and people listen to what he has to say, and like I just wish that he'd use that platform to highlight this league, highlight the lower leagues, because we've got a hell of a lot of talent and a hell of a lot of good football and this is still, people talk about, you know, the Premier League, and they talk about it becoming sort of overpriced and people getting priced out of games because they've got players on £300,000-400,000 a week. This is still what football always was. It's the working man's game down here. It's and it always will be.
I still think he does a lot of good as well. I mean, he paid a lot of people furlough at Salford. He's one of the people to do that. He put his hotel up for accommodation for NHS staff. I think he speaks a lot of sense. Even in the meetings I hear, he speaks a lot of good things as well. He's just that he grew up with Alex Ferguson.
His standards are a bit higher than at that point, aren't you?
And his standards are, you know what, you are this, and this. If you roof, but I was having a certain player, I won't name his name. I told him not to go home on a Thursday night. We'd have the day off, and I told him not to go home because he lived in London, and he was coming home, and he would drive. So I was telling him to come home on a Thursday night, not the Friday morning. He would leave at 4 o'clock in the morning. Would turn up to training. His hair's all over. His eyes. He would train really, really poorly. So Gary got a meeting in with his agent, and I said, Gary, I won't pick him. He's late. His standards are poor. He doesn't train well. His output is no. Rich, you've got to play and give him another chance. Come on, if this is for Alex Ferguson, that player would be out the door straight away. Yeah. And he's a Man United fan, and he's seen over the last 4 or 5 years that some of them players, attitude-wise, are not. And he's out. He's saying these players need to get out. Yeah. And I was at Salford. That there's a very same predicament, and I wanted certain players out to build a culture. And once you start getting these certain players out, the other players look at you and go, he means business. And when he's making a decision, he's backed by the board, i.e. Gary at the time, and Karen, I really like Karen. Yeah. Oh, hang on a minute, he's making them decisions and now he's being backed by Gary. Well, we better get on board with this guy because we need to, the owners are sticking by him. Yeah. As soon as the players see that the manager's not being supported, then players knew that they was never going to get a new contract for me because they could not get a team promoted from League Two, never mind getting into the top 6 of League One. And that was a real frustration for me.
I think that kind of undermines you a little bit, doesn't it? When a player's sat there and you're saying, I'm not going to play him, and the owners are saying, no, you need to. And that player knows that your opinion really is being overridden and they can carry on doing what they've done. Yeah, no, I mean, there's been a big change, I think, at Salford. And I think that's quite evident when you look at, being brutally honest, that the form that they've gone through this season under Neil Wood. And I think 3-4 years ago, I don't think Neil Wood would have been given the opportunity and the time that he's being given now. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be, because I do think that, you know, they've got a hell of a lot of injuries and things like that. But there seems to have been a change in the way that they approach things, and managers are being given that extra chance to really get things going and build something themselves.
What's changed massively is the style of football is really good.
Yeah,
they play a good style of football. One thing I will say as well, what Gary's done great is the academy at Salford is really, really good. They're promoting a lot of young players. Again, that was the players that I had, it was all aging. They've been at. Sometimes if you think you'll sign a championship player at 34 years old and he's dropping down to League Two, you think it's a good signing. Mm-hmm. The legs have gone. They've only come there for a last payday. They ain't that hungry to really drive themselves and others around them to get back up, because they know that if they get back up, they're going to get released. But if they stay in League Two, they're probably going to get a new contract. So you need to be careful when you're signing players dropping down. They're not happy with the facilities of the training ground, so they moan at things like that. So there's been a lot of good at that club that has been gone on in the last 5-6 years. But even from when they first took over, they took it a hell of a long way. But now when I watch Salford play, I enjoy watching them play football. They've got some really technical, good players. We had 2 tough games against them last year. And I hope for their sake that they can continue that style of football and get better players in and get promoted.
I think looking at their squad on Saturday, I believe they only had 8 first-team players fit. Like, as in what you would...
Any club at League One, League Two level, the drop-off from your first 14, 15 players to underneath that. We don't have... So at Leyton Orient, we don't have a B team or a reserve. We have first-team 18s. And the gap is huge. So I understand Neil Wood's pain and where he's coming from there.
Yeah, we were there the other week. We watched them play Peterborough in the Cup, and they gave a really good account of themselves, because Peterborough are not a walkover team. Like, Peterborough are a very, very well-oiled team, and they gave, brutally honest, they should have won 4-3 in the 121st minute. There's been 1 minute of added time, and the referee played 2 more minutes when the ball didn't go out of play, and they scored in the 123rd. It was the people were raging. So I'm going to come on to Swindon. We've not done this in any order here, Richard. This has been class. I've enjoyed it, because it is like, this is just how my brain works. I've just allowed my brain to just run wild here. But I'm going to come on to Swindon, because I've got questions around your time at Swindon. Because am I right in saying that when you were manager at Swindon, was Paul Jewell involved at the club at that point?
Yeah. So Paul Jewell was actually my assistant manager at Oldham. And
right.
When he come in, I kind of look at Paul as a kind of mentor, because he's a manager that's obviously, he was a player that never quite reached the top, but then he was a manager that reached the top, managing the Premier League, won promotions from the Championship, and he come in at Oldham, and I thought with the problems that I was having with the owners, I thought he'd be a real good sounding board, full of opinions, would argue, loved him to bits. But then he couldn't stand the chairman and the things that were going on in the background, so he left. But then when I got sacked, he'd obviously seen something in me, that Lee Powell was his mate, that, give Richie a chance. I think there's a lot of good things that Richie's got. I think he was sold a bit of a problem at Oldham. I think give him an opportunity. I think he'll reward you. And so Lee Powell gave me the opportunity to go in as manager, and Paul Jewell was my director of football, which I think helped him. And I think a lot of young managers make the mistake of getting either the mates in or people in and around the same age group that form the same opinions. Julie's from a totally different... I'm a little bit old school like Paul, but he's ultra old school. I've got 2 young kids. I've got a young kid who's a 20-year-old and a kid who's both in academies at 15. So I kind of understand the younger generation now, but he's totally old school, and I love that as well. So he's a brilliant sounding board. Advice, if you go through 2 or 3 games without winning, he just drop little nuggets, little bits of advice that you just go, I get it, I see it. Brilliant, brilliant. And then obviously my relationship with the chairman was always brilliant, because my go-between was Paul Jewell, who I loved to bits, and Lee Powell, who was his best mate. So it worked brilliant. And obviously then he would sort all the signings out in terms of speaking to agents, doing the deals. I think it suited him that he could come in when there was no pressure to be in every single day at 9 o'clock and not leave till 5. He could play golf. He could be relaxed, knowing that he could trust us to get on with the training ground stuff, and he could be in the background just putting everything together. But he was a tremendous help. He's someone now who I speak to probably once a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I don't have to talk about Paul Jewell and Bradford. Like, he took us to the top, and we got to like some of the best years that I don't think we'll personally ever see it again. It's surreal that we got to witness it, and he's held in huge, like, high regard. I think everywhere he's been, really, there's not many clubs where he's not got that status about him. Well, one of the questions from Swindon fans was about the owner, but you've kind of answered it there. Like, it worked because you had a go between. You didn't really have to deal with the owner directly, because you had someone who was so close to him that you knew you could trust, and you knew you would get the honest truth from. So I don't really think from that perspective there's anything there. But I want to just something that I noticed about your time at Swindon, and I want to ask you if you agree with this. So when I spoke to Pete Wild said, you mentioned a 3-year plan that you're currently in with Orient. And Pete Wild said the same thing, that he goes in with a 3-year plan. He says, when you go into a club and you take over after the season started, season 1 is crisis management. It's making sure that you are stable, you've got what you need to get through that season. And then season 2, you have that opportunity to put your own stamp on things. Did you feel that was the same for you? Because your first season at Swindon, you sort of came in November time, didn't you? That first season sort of just essentially trying to get through to the end of it and find out where your weaknesses and things laid so that in the summer you could rebuild?
Now, again, it's relative to what club you have. So
Right.
if you Barrow in League Two, I totally get that. If you're Swindon in League Two, you need to be right up there. Otherwise, you're under massive pressure. So my first game was basically League Power. The club was valued at about £8 million.
Mm-hmm.
If we got to League One, it was £16 million. It's a 40-minute journey from Paddington, from London. It's a good sized stadium. It's got room around the stadium to build on top of it, hotels, etc. And the fan base is absolutely tremendous. So from a selling point, it's an attractive proposition. So my remit was to try and get the club from League Two to League One to double the value, so then Lee would sell the club. And in the first week, I probably signed on a Thursday. I probably had 1 or 2 training sessions. I turn up, there's 4,000 there. We're playing Carlisle at home against my old manager, John Sheridan.
Yep.
4,000 there, of which they're all just protesting. We want the chairman out. And it was like, for the first half an hour, it was absolutely brilliant. I had to sub a midfield player off because his wife had just gone into labour, and the fans are booing me because they think
How selfish of her.
because they don't know you just think I'm subbing him off. They don't know the reasoning behind it. And at the end of the game, we've been beat 4-0, and I just want the ground to swallow me up. I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, you're coming for a little bit of criticism, but then we have a full week to train, and we win the next 3.
Yeah.
Next 3 games, we go from 20th to we get away from that relegation, and give us a little bit of breathing space. And I knew that we had some core players, the likes of Keshi Anderson, way too good for League Two. We had a core group of players that, if we get our recruitment right in the summer, then we could do a lot of damage. We flirted with the playoffs in that first. It wasn't even a full season. I think I went in after about 20 games.
November time. I think it went back in November. After Phil Brown.
We flirted with the playoffs, and then I didn't want to get in the playoffs because it would have been like League One now. Really, where do we go from here? And what the plan was to get to the summer. We got the likes of Jerry Yates, some stupid club, London's Owen Doyle.
Right. No, he didn't work at Bradford. Certain players don't work at certain clubs, and he didn't work for us.
I think it's a style.
Yeah, his style didn't work. But see, now Swindon fans are going to be all over this now. They're going to clip that little bit in my face when you mentioned it, because I get that constantly. Yeah, but it's happening again this season.
He was getting to the point where me and Doyle had argued. So when he scored 2, I take him off, and as he's coming off, he's going, "You're not scoring another hat-trick, Doyle. I can't be having you in the papers again." And Bradford ringing me, and I'm thinking he just put us under more pressure to keep him. So it was actually the amount of times he was 3-0 up at half time, or 3 or 4-0 up with 20 minutes to go, and I just take him off and just try and not. I didn't want him to score in the last 20 minutes when games were already won. It was an unbelievable situation, if I'm being honest.
It was infuriating.
I bet it was. And then we signed him. We signed Jerry Yates, who was absolutely brilliant for us. Zeki Fryers was brilliant for us. Anthony Grant was very, very good for us. We signed a goalkeeper from Swansea who's at Fulham now, Stephen Bender, exceptional goalkeeper. And you link them in with Michael Doughty, with Keshi Anderson, with Kane Mullery, where did Lloyd Isgrove. We now built a squad that I'm looking at and thinking we should be top 3 in League Two. Yeah. But when we get to League One, I only need to change 4 or 5 players, and we've got a chance again. It's just sod's law that COVID happens, and then we get the promotion. But Bender goes, all the loan players go. Romani Edmonds Green. Yeah. Michael Doughty retires. Keshi Anderson leaves to go Blackpool. Jerry Yates goes to Blackpool, and I lose 80% of my starting team, and then I have to go into a League One season with a reduced budget, and it's tough. It's really, really tough because it was my baby. It's like Leyton Orient now. It's my baby. I try and visualize where we're going to go with it, and okay, this position needs this in this amount of time, and then we can do that. And what do we need from this position? And you're putting building blocks in place. I've literally built a really good block of apartments, and we're about to put the penthouse on, and someone comes and just swipes it all down. But
takes the bottom floor out.
Again, it was brilliant because the chairman goes, "Rich, there's your budget. spend it how you want. If you want to go and give a striker 30 grand a week and do your budget on one striker, go and do it. But just there's the keys to my house. Go and do it. My relationship with Lee, I can't speak highly enough of him. Absolute brilliant guy. Brilliant. We would meet and we'd have a meeting and he'd say, meet me in this pub, and we'd have 10 pints and we wouldn't even talk about the game coming up or the previous game. He loves his horse racing. I love my horse racing. We speak about different things, and it was an absolute play. It's just a travesty the way it finished.
It didn't end well, and I don't think they've ever really recovered. They obviously, when they came down, they had that season where they made the playoffs and they lost to Vale in the playoff semis. But I don't feel like as a club they've yet recovered. They've not bounced back fully yet. Like, it will happen, and we all know.
But Liam, it's a very club that's similar to Bradford. Them supporters will always. It just needs someone to grab hold of it.
Yeah,
and
once get them back on track.
And once you get them grab hold of it, So I talk about the first game being 4,000. By the time I'd left, one of the last home games was Exeter at home, and there was 13,000 there. It was full to the rafters. And you know what? If we would have had 5 or 6 more thousand spaces, it would have filled up as well. It was just the transition. What we'd gone through was absolutely unbelievable.
Who was the last team you played? Obviously, the league was cancelled, wasn't it, because of COVID? Who was the last team you played?
It was actually on the way up. When it got cancelled, we was actually on the way up to Oldham to play Oldham.
Yeah. Who was the last team you played before that? Do you remember?
Oh, I can't remember.
Bradford.
Was it Bradford? Yeah.
Yeah. As far as yeah. It was
Doyle had signed last minute.
Which always seems to happen in Bradford Swindon games. There's always a last minute goal, and it's usually against us because we seem to slip off towards the end. But on the Doyle situation, right, I'm going to give you the Bradford perspective of this, right? So, phenomenal first half of the season. This is why I'm worried about Jake Young, because it's happening again, and it literally is like we're seeing it this season. It's awful because we didn't have the greatest of starts to the season. Obviously, Andy Cook was carrying an injury. We've lost our manager, and then we've ended up sitting and watching Jake Young. I think he's on 16 goals now. Yeah. Which is, I think he's on 22 goal contributions, and I think we've only scored 25 or 24 as a club. And when Doyle came back, because obviously Bradford called him back, didn't they? And he played 2 games for us.
I watched him away. One was Colchester away, and one was Mansfield away. The Colchester away, I watched him, and I went with my assistant, and I'm saying, if we don't know Doyle. And I'm looking at him now, ready to say, I won't touch him.
No. He just didn't want to be there at that point, though, did he? Because he'd built that relationship with you guys and the team there, and there was...
It's that, but it was also, he didn't like long balls. And we would send, where we just wanted him to stay in between the centre-backs all the time and make certain runs, off the back of... We would fill the pockets either side of him with the 2 wingers, and our full-backs would give us a width. So he's surrounded by players. I watched him, and he's not. Doyle will tell you he's not the quickest, but his movement, his counter movements, and his awareness in the box is exceptional, and his finishing's really, really good as well. So, when I watched him in them 2 games at Bradford, he was isolated, had to run channels. Well, if you ask him to do that, then you're not going to see the best of him.
No, you've got to build your team around players like that, haven't you? The players that you know can win your games. Do you know what? I'm sat here, right, and I'm looking back over my notes for this interview, and I'm thinking, I don't even know why I asked to do this, because this has been soul destroying. I have literally relived some of the worst times as a fan. Like I've had Doyle come up. I've spoke about the Doncaster team that we hated playing. That season, Swindon, you guys were dominant. I believe, was it you guys? Did your Crew go up with you as well that year?
I think Crew finished second. Plymouth finished third. Both full of good players. Both teams.
We interviewed Dave Artell as well about the same season, and obviously it'd been interesting to see how that would have played out towards the end of that season.
So we had 10 games left, and 10 of the bottom 11. We had 10 of the bottom 11, of which we were pretty ruthless against them kind of teams. We'd gone through that January where we had Plymouth away and Crew. We played Crew at home, and we didn't have no Doyle there. Everyone was saying Doyle and Yates have gone back. You'll blow it, and we just kept ticking over. Going. And then once we got them back,
there was no stopping you, was there?
Yeah, we've not absolute no chance.
Yeah, I like to see Swindon fans are going to love that. They're going to absolutely love that. Well, obviously, we've covered Doncaster, we've covered Salford, we've covered Swindon, we've spoke about Oldham. We started with Leyton Orient, but I want to ask. I've had the same question sent in by several people. And it's not about something that happened in your career. It's about an if. It's about a potential. It's about a rumor about your managerial career. Now, this isn't a slight on Leyton Orient in any way, because you wouldn't change anything because you've gone to Leyton Orient, you've thrived. But before Bradford got Mark Hughes, there were rumours that you were going to be unveiled as Bradford manager. And I've been asked this so many times. Was that something that you were close to? Was it as close as it was reported, or was it just general discussions? Did it never happen? Because we don't know what goes on. We only get the rumours, and it's so hard. But I've got so many Bradford fans that just want to know what we missed out on. Let's be brutally honest.
Yeah, it was weird. It was really, really weird. So I'd applied it. So I spoke to the CEO when my agent spoke to the CEO, and he was very like, listen, there's one person that we really like Richie. And then something happened really quickly where my odds went from like 1 to 10 or something. And usually when it goes to them odds, someone's got a job. And you know what it's like, people ring you, you've gone to this price and gone to that price. And I'm like, but I've not heard anything. So I thought, have I got this? But no, we're just waiting for a phone call. And then one of the players' agents rang me and said, have you got the Bradford job? And I was like, no. And this was probably about 3 weeks before I got the Leyton Orient job. The Leyton Orient job hadn't come up by this time.
Yeah.
And an agent rang me and gone, have you got the Bradford job? I was like, well, no, I've not heard anything. He said, oh, like the players have been told to be in at the ground tomorrow earlier because they're about to do a press conference. Like, well, it's not me.
Yeah.
And I literally, because I was out of work then, I had a line in the morning, and literally at 9:30 in the morning, it flashes up on my phone with Mark Hughes has accepted the Bradford job. I dropped my phone and just went, because it looks like a brilliant announcement. Mark Hughes is, the amount of games that he's, a career. He's a hero of mine, Mark. Started watching him and Brian Upson playing for Man United, but brilliant managerial career. Very surprised that he dropped into League Two. He was when Mark left. There was a couple of phone calls to see if I would be interested. I've probably had 5 or 6 offers since I've been at Leyton Orient. But one of the question marks against me, Bradford's a massive club. I've had probably 2 or 3 clubs in League One ring me and said, would I be interested in speaking to them? Probably more prepared to go up than Leyton Orient. And then at the end of last year, one club in a higher league asked me if I would be interested in talking to them. But one of the things that people put against me was loyalty. When I left Swindon, with the threat of Lee Power losing the club, with the threat of COVID, me wanting to be at home with my family, and then people always said, oh, he's not loyal and he's not this. So I've made a conscious effort that the people at Leyton Orient, the owners first and foremost, Martin Ling, who's my director of football, and very similar to the relationship that I have with Martin, that I had with Paul Jewell, and then my relationship with the supporters, along with a 3-year plan, has made me think, why would I go elsewhere at the moment when so many people have put their faith in me? I want to put my loyalty back into them.
Absolutely. And that's how it should be. And I think that there should be more people that look at it that way. I'm shocked that you just said that there was a call after Mark left. I didn't know that. That wasn't even a rumor. I mean, people did say, go and get Richie Wellens from Orient. And they'd say it to me and I'd be like, he's a League One club thriving. Like, why would he drop to us? Like, we've got to, look, I mean, that's throwing me as that there. I do have some, when we finished, I've got something else you mentioned there that I have an answer to, that I can talk to you about. But as far as Orient's concerned, so that's the now, that's where you're at. You're in this 3-year plan. For you, is it, you want to obviously progress and you want to push on into that top half. How long is it you're sort of looking before you're thinking that as a club or as a team, you'll have built something that you feel is ready to look at maybe making that step? How long do you feel away you are from that? I know it's a hard question to answer, I suppose, but
I think you don't really put a time frame on that. You see the team evolving, and if you see it evolving at the right rate that you want it to, then you're happy to start adding layers on. And if you're not, then you need to make changes in terms of when the transfer window happens. We've given a lot of players a lot of opportunities this year. We picked a team on Tuesday night, but the average age of our team is under 22.
Wow.
Which again, is a lot of young players. So we need to ride that when them young players make mistakes. We need to go through their learning processes, which I'm prepared to do. Sometimes, even though it's a 3-year plan, some of our supporters ain't happy at the moment because we're not winning every week. We don't beat Wigan at home, even though Wigan have got some championship players still, and the budget's a lot higher than ours. We're still not happy about beating Wigan. Well, okay, we drew 1-1. How do we draw 1-1? Well, apart from the first 5 minutes when Wigan started very well, for the next 85 minutes, we're pretty dominant in the game. And it's a really, really comfortable 1-1. And if anybody's going to win it, we're going to win it. But we haven't, because we've not got quite them little nasty things and little game management things yet to get us to that 2-1, that 3-1 victory. But we're happy with that. If we're drawing 1-1 and it's the Alamo and we're sitting in deep and we're defending crosses every 2 minutes and we come off and we go, how do we steal a point? Then I'm worried. But I'm not. I'm happy with the way things are going. We need another striker because we have 65% of the ball, and we need another attacking threat because Jordan Graham's out injured. We've only just got Dan Adji fit. He's played 10 minutes in the last 2 games. It's the first time he's kicked a ball for us. Aaron Drinnan has not really got going this year because injured pre-season, injured again now. And when you're having to totally disrupt, when I get a settled system and have a striker and 2 wide men and a striker and 2 wide men on the bench, and they do 60, 70, and these come on 20, 30, and you just keep the same stuff going, but with fresh energy and at higher intensity for the last 20 minutes, then we're really good. But at the moment, we start the season off and we haven't won in 4. I have to change and go to 3 at the back because we've got 4 really good centre-backs. I have to change to stabilise us in the league. And in the next 10 games, we get 16, should have been 19 points because we played Lincoln and it got disallowed. But we get a set of points that, now we're starting to grow. And now we can start to go back the way that we want to play football again. But unfortunately, we've picked up a couple of injuries. I don't think you put a time frame on it. I think your eyes don't lie to you. You can see people improving. And as soon as you think that players start drifting and are just getting really comfortable, then we move them out and we get new players in.
No, I agree. I think that's you can see, as long as you can see movement forward and not stagnating or moving backwards, that's always a good thing, isn't it? There's always that progression going there. I had a question just sent in literally right now, and I haven't read this, so I'm going to read it out as it is. In terms of player recruitment, is statistics now a big part of player recruitment alongside clips, or is there a heavier reliance on one more than the other? It's the person who sent it in is very interested in that sort of field. So do you guys kind of look at statistics a lot more now than you used to? I think XG is obviously a really big thing for a lot of people now, which I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, for XG is a really good one because you might be looking at strikers that have only scored 5 or 6 goals in a season, but the keeper might have pulled off some unbelievable saves.
Yeah,
hit the post, hit the bar. They've missed chances what usually would take, and their expected goals might be 18, 20, where they've only scored 5. So you can see development in them kind of players. I think that each coach, each manager has to break them down, them characteristics of what they want from that position. We just mentioned Owen Doyle. Owen Doyle for Bradford can't score. Owen Doyle for why? You look at some of the centre halves in our league, and you look at them statistically, and they head it like so many times, but we don't play long ball. So we don't really want them stats for us because every time we get a free kick, if it's in a good area, we'll put it in. But if we have a free kick in our own half, we'll hand on and play. Whereas a lot of other teams, you send everyone up and the centre halves are winning, a lot of headed balls in opposition boxes. Well, that's not really relative to the way that we want to play. So I think it's important that you do get stats involved because it can be helpful, and break them down how you want your team to look and the important stats. And when they look favourable and you've narrowed this 2,000 players down to 20, then go and watch them. I go and watch players a lot. I get there early. I watch the body language, what they're like in warm-ups. I see sometimes if they get there in the sub, I watch them. I watch how they warm up. I watch the mannerisms on the bench, see what the body language is, see when they come on, did they impact the game or are they sulking? Loads and loads of different aspects. And the biggest one for me is when you're about to sign a player, you obviously watch him, you do your homework on the pitch, but then speak to players who have worked with him, speak to managers who have worked with him. And you know what? There's a lot of good people in the industry who will give you their honest opinion, and very rarely have I been sold short when I asked people that I trust their opinion.
That's mad. That's absolutely mad. I've never thought about players' body language sat on a bench and things like that. Just for me, I always think they're not switched on until that point, like until they come on the field. So, but yeah, I suppose you've got to look at how they adapt to being dropped to the bench or how they're going to warm up when they're told to go out and things. Because I suppose you can tell what sort of player you're going to get on the field, then, can't you? If they're really, really intense in the warm up when the game's going on because they're going to come on, or if they kind of half-ass it, you know that there's two different sort of players there. I really like that, and I think that's given a really good answer for the lad that sent it in.
A good example is last year at Leyton Orient, we had one player that got double figures in goals.
Yeah,
a lot of we played some brilliant football at times. We played some dogged football where we had to put it in areas, win second balls, and fight and scrap because it's League Two. Some of the pitches ain't great. Some of the stadiums are small, and the conditions can impact the game. But what we did have is we had 22 lads, 25 lads, group of staff that loved each other, that worked hard, that respected that the manager could only pick 11 players. Yeah. And when a teammate is coming off for his other teammate, they respected each other. They didn't complain. Okay, we had conversations in the background about, okay, he's not happy about playing and what have you, but every single player respected. I think part of our success last year was the team spirit.
That wins you the league more than money does, doesn't it? At times, like that's what's going to drag you over the line when it comes to those hard months and the injury crises. And like you say, those clubs that you go into where the stadiums they're not great. You know, we're not going to throw certain clubs under the bus, but there's a lot in League Two that you look at, and I go and visit, and I'm like, oh, God, sat there, you're freezing cold because you're open to the elements because there may as well not be 4 stands there because they're all tiny little things, and then that's why you've got to make your home things count. So I've got one last question for you, and this is more of a challenge, and it's for you and Leyton Orient. We at the beginning of this year. And your media team don't know this is coming, so you might say yes to this and they might go, absolutely not. So we, at the beginning of this year, 2 years ago, Soccer AM finished, and for me growing up, that was like a staple for me. Like that was where I got my football fix before I went to football. It was so good. One of the things that we loved about it was Crossbar Challenge. So we've taken on Crossbar Challenge this season, and we've been challenging clubs. So I've got 4 clubs currently that are doing it. We're at Barrow on Monday. We're going to Scunthorpe. We're going to be doing some stuff with Salford to hopefully do a Crossbar Challenge there. Richie Wellens, will Leyton Orient accept the Crossbar Challenge?
Absolutely. Just don't ask me to do it. I'm too old now and I can't reach that far.
Right. Okay. So that I'm happy not to ask you to do it on the proviso that you don't ask me to do it. Because I genuinely that's my worry about Barrow on Monday. I'm going to Barrow on Monday, and I've got these Barrow players all fired up for it, and I've got a feeling that they're going to ask me to take the first kick, and I can't do it. There's no way. So we'll back each other on that. I'll hold my hamstring. If you pick a different injury, or it'll look a bit sus. But we'd love it. We'd love to get you involved, and we'd
no problem.
Absolutely. Well, look, honestly, I can't thank you enough for this, and it's genuinely been one of, I think, the more eye-opening ones for me, and I can only thank you for your honesty as well. You've handled everything thrown at you. It's amazing. I hope everybody who's watching or listening has enjoyed this, and I hope we can do this again sometime. We'll have a catch up when you've got Leyton Orient promoted from League One. When that day comes, we'll have that conversation. But for now, thank you very much. I can't say much. I'm a bit gobsmacked by some of the stuff that we spoke about tonight, but honestly, thank you so much for doing this. We do really appreciate it.
No, absolute pleasure.
Cracking. Guys, we will catch you next time. Thank you very much.